Positively Kansas is brought to you in part by the Johnson family of Uptown New Orleans, bringing you this week's edition of My American Dream.
The following program is brought to you by TZ Productions, celebrating KPTS's nearly 50 years of community support in South Central Kansas. Great starts here on KPTS.
Brought to you by Central Security Group, your experts in home automation, security, and peace of mind. View video on your smartphone and control your home's lights, locks, heating, cooling, and more. Security app compatible with Apple Watch and Amazon Echo.
Program support provided by the F. Price Kosman Memorial Trust, Entrust Bank trustee, bringing you the Kansas Wild Edge segments on Positively Kansas.
It's time for Positively Kansas. Coming up, did you know Wichita was a hotbed of rock and roll back in the 60s and 70s? This man has done the research and written a comprehensive history that is far out, man. Stick around and learn all about it. Plus, some photographers focus on people and landscapes, but this guy takes pictures of food, and he's one of the best in the business. Discover how this Kansan carved out this niche for himself and what makes for beautiful food in a photo. I'm Sierra Scott. We're glad you're here. Positively Kansas starts right now. Stepped-up immigration enforcement by the Trump administration has many Hispanics in Kansas fearing for themselves and their families. In response, a Wichita organization is intensifying efforts to help undocumented Kansans become legal residents. At the same time, this organization is providing a host of other services to the Hispanic community, which has a growing list of needs. Anthony Powell has the details.
Music, food, laughter, and joy. All part of the recent Mother's Day celebration at the La Familia Senior and Community Center on Wichita's west side. May 10th is always Mother's Day in Mexico, and since most of the members here are Hispanic, that's the day the center holds its tribute to moms. The celebration also showcasing the center's diversity and sense of community, a second home for so many.
We are brothers, sisters. Doesn't matter what color we are.
But of course, it's not just the Mother's Day celebration that makes this place so special for those who call it a second home. For nearly every day of the year, the La Familia Center offers a variety of services and a community that greatly enhances the lives of everyone who walks through the doors here. Now, you couldn't tell by the fun being had at the Mother's Day celebration, but there is indeed a lot of fear here among folks who are not legal citizens. That's why one of the center's most important services is assisting with the complex naturalization process.
This is America, and we are a country of immigrants. So anything we can do to help people naturalize by choice and legalized by any choice.
Dr. Lee telling us about a recent talk she had with an undocumented center member.
Called out my name, I walked over to her car and she was sharing with me her anxiety.
Erica Torres, seen here with her husband Rocky, is the member Dr. Lee is referring to. The center, Torres says, offers a place to distract her from her anxiety.
I feel peaceful when I come here.
Much of that peace comes from knowing that the center is helping to pay for an attorney so that the Torreses can become legal. The couple is paying it back by working here.
My husband cut the grass, he cleaned the yard, the gardens and everything, and I help them here when they sell enchiladas.
But citizenship services are just one of many offered here. Despite being in her 70s, Dr. Lee, who has 7 degrees, yes 7, works tirelessly.
Keep the pace, keep the pace, keep the pace.
to improve the lives of her beloved members in a variety of other ways as well.
Anything we can do to help with language, reading, learning, skill training, knowledge building, work-paced, gives people honor, but identity.
Particular attention is paid to good health practices. Diabetes and other screenings, nutrition classes, and exercise programs are all available.
We're the only senior center in the county that has a wellness office.
Finding housing is also on the laundry list of services offered. But equally important is the sense of purpose the center provides. 71-year-old Clasario Delgadillo is in charge of the gardening. He's grateful he has a place to come instead of sitting home and watching TV like so many other seniors.
Oh, it makes me feel good. It gives me something to do, like the doctor says. Because when I first started doing that, the gardening here, my hands were not too strong because of the stroke. I was still not strong enough. And now I'm here doing something that keeps me going.
Yes, like the rest of us, the folks who come here have plenty of issues in their lives. Much bigger problems, especially when it comes to something like possible deportation. But thanks to the La Familia Senior and Community Center, they have a place to make those problems a little bit easier to deal with. And that's something that touches the heart of Dr. Lee, who has always had a soft spot in her heart for those facing huge obstacles.
Understanding the need of the impoverished, the marginalized, the vulnerables.
For Positively Kansas, I'm Anthony Powell.
And here's something really exciting. The La Familia Center is a finalist for a national award given to the community center in America that does the most to serve its members with a wide variety of essential programs. Wichita has always been a breeding ground for talented musicians, but we've seldom been on the cutting edge of new trends. So when rock and roll took Wichita by storm in the 1960s, it became clear that this new genre had widespread appeal and staying power. Now there's a book that sheds new light on Wichita's place in rock and roll history and rock and roll's place in Wichita's history. Jeff Goodman has that story.
One might argue that the history of rock and roll actually began in Wichita, Kansas in the early 1930s, when Wichita musician and club owner Gage Brewer introduced an electrified instrument that would some 20 years later change the music industry forever.
Wichita being one of the pioneering spots for the performance of the electric guitar, which happened in 1932.
It was during a conversation about this debut of the electric guitar that WSU professor Jay Price got the inspiration for a book chronicling Wichita's rich and dynamic rock band scene. The goal of the project was to focus on Wichita rock bands in the 1950s to the 1980s, a time frame that Price says exemplifies an entire generation coming to age through what's been aptly called rock and roll's golden years.
They go from being teenagers playing at gigs where their parents dropped them off to being involved in a really lively and raucous club scene to how do you handle family and career.
In the late 50s and 60s, the meteoric rise of performers such as Elvis and the Beatles inspired kids across the USA to form bands. Wichita was no exception. Young local musicians like Mike Finnegan and Rudy Love Sr. formed bands and began playing gigs in the local club circuit, and the local music scene began to grow and prosper.
This takes place at a time when Wichita is undergoing a significant amount of change. Everything from changes in the aircraft industry, Vietnam, the beat movement, changes in race relations, changes in local economics, and how different generations play into that.
In the 1960s, change was ever present. Just as the war in Vietnam affected America's social fabric, so did the strife of African Americans fighting for equal rights here in the U.S.
Wichita is absolutely a place where race is a challenging issue. We are one of the most segregated cities. in the country. But it was in the rock music scene where we saw some of the beginnings of the relationship between white and African American musicians.
Such relationships laid the groundwork for emerging young musicians like Rudy Love, who became popular with both white and black audiences.
1, 2, 3, 4.
In the 1970s, many local bands began copying the sounds of the mega rock bands that filled arenas all across the country. One Wichita musician who made his way to California to become a member of one of the biggest bands of that era, his rise to stardom gave other Wichita musicians the chutzpah to take their shot at the big time.
If you think about rock music in Wichita, the name that probably comes up the most is going to be Joe Walsh of the Eagles. But he's going to make his name outside of Wichita. And so you're going to look at individuals like Jerry Hahn, Jerry Wood, Pat McJimsey, Mike Finnegan. Those are going to be really key names.
The 1970s gave away to the 1980s and to the rise of the MTV generation. Wichita bands developed their own sound, an eclectic mishmash of punk and new wave mixed in with a certain Midwest sensibility. One such band, The Clocks, made a big hit on the charts with the song She Looks a Lot Like You. The song topped the Billboard music chart at number 69, giving the band ample playing time on MTV and FM radio.
She looks a lot like you. She looks a lot like you.
As a new generation of performers come into their own in Wichita, Price says the book can serve as a guide, and that today's up-and-coming musicians learn much from the stories of the trials and tribulations of the early Wichita rock bands and learn how they fostered a unique sound through adaptation, ingenuity, and talent. For Positively Kansas, I'm Jeff Goodvin.
You can buy the Wichita Rock and Roll book at select local bookstores and on Amazon. Now to a local photographer whose work will definitely give you some food for thought, shall we say. Over the years, Wichitan Gavin Peters has become one of the most sought-after local picture takers of people and architecture. But what you might not know is that his work is also responsible for making consumers crave the food of some high-profile Wichita companies. Anthony Powell recently saw Peters in action.
You want to go with kind of the same.
A flurry of activity in the Cargill Innovation Center's test kitchen as Gavin Peters gets ready to do what he does best, use his lens to make food come alive. On this day, Peters is shooting various ingredients of a prepared meal product. Between pictures, he confers with Cargill's marketing team and ad agency folks from Sullivan, Higdon, and Sink. Peters says when shooting a product people use at home, the pictures must inspire.
Bringing it to life and making it look as delicious as possible, and to where people want to eat it or go buy it, inspiring people to maybe take a step into a different, into the kitchen, into a different recipe. They're like, I think I can do this.
Peters, meanwhile, remembers thinking he might be able to make it as a photographer when he was about 15.
I had a fantastic photography teacher at Southeast High School here in Wichita, Ken Enquist, just a great guy. He kind of looked at me and he said, you probably have the ability to maybe pursue this, at least in college, maybe farther, so.
Much to his parents' dismay, he dropped out of college.
My dad said, man, you're gonna be living in my basement when you're 35, so.
Turns out, though, the sky would be the limit for Gavin Peters' photography. He built the foundation of his business shooting headshots and print ads, which he remains active with. Later would come an opportunity to shoot food for a magazine, a return to his roots of sorts.
I'm very comfortable around food. My mom was a caterer, and my grandparents, my grandmas were awesome cooks, and so I was very comfortable looking at food and knowing what was awesome about it.
Combining his love of food and photography, Peters found more and more work in this niche. Eventually, big-name companies came calling. He's worked with Cargill for a decade.
Whether it's, beef or turkey, he really knows the lighting to bring out the different colors or the juiciness.
Peters says working in a town like Wichita, where there are so many top-notch companies like Cargill, makes his job of showcasing their quality products that much easier. But Cargill is not the only high-profile Wichita food-related company that employs Gavin Peters. Freddy's Frozen Custard and Steak Burgers is another of his clients. Peters' pictures of juicy burgers, crispy fries, and creamy ice cream helps bring in customers to Freddy's all over the country. Freddy's co-founder Scott Redler has several of Peters' pictures in his office. Redler says attention to detail sets Peters apart.
When we're going to use an ad today with over 300 restaurants in 31 states, it has to be great. Not good, it has to be great. And we want food to jump off the plate. We want it to look just phenomenal and make you go, I want to have that double cheeseburger at Freddy's or that turtle sundae. And he's able to really help capture that.
Peters says Freddy's is another example of a Wichita company that spares no expense to make its products the best possible. He loves thinking about how often someone in America or in another part of the world might see a Freddy's picture he's taken and think,
I have to have it. I have to have that shake.
But it's not just Peters' talent that keeps clients calling.
He's extremely easygoing, very collaborative, which we really appreciate, especially during shoots. Sometimes we have to be flexible and make changes, and that's what Gavin's so great at.
He's also very humble.
I'm lucky. I mean, 15 years old, I pick up a camera, and here I am now, more than 25 years later, so.
And most importantly, not living in your parents' basement.
Let's just not count that out. I mean, there's always tomorrow.
But for this talented, versatile photographer and nice guy, tomorrow seems destined to bring the same kind of success and fulfillment as the last several years have. For Positively Kansas, I'm Anthony Powell.
Peters' food photography resume doesn't stop with Cargill and Freddy's. He's also worked for Carlos O'Kelly's, Scotch and Sirloin, and Spears. Are you hungry now? Well, a smoke eater remembers his past by transferring memories onto a kaleidoscope of fiery canvas. Former Wichita firefighter Alan Lister, turned artist, shows us a lifetime of blazing emotions in a series of paintings. John Wright has his story.
That's 74-year-old Alan Lister, a retired Wichita and Whitewater firefighter who now spends his time capturing fiery moments of his past on canvas. The most vivid moment seared in Alan's mind was the January 16, 1965 Piat plane crash, Wichita's deadliest aviation disaster. Alan remembers the moment he arrived on scene and couldn't believe his eyes.
The street was full of water, and then a lot of the water was on fire. That's what I saw when I first got there. There was still about 12 or 15 foot of the tail sticking out of the ground.
Other fires have been captured with the stroke from Alan's color-stained brush in his home studio in rural Newton. Over time, Alan would enter a number of contests in Wichita and surrounding communities, including the Presbyterian Manor's Art is Ageless and City Arts contests.
So I got in with a painting this year, and it's only an 8 by 10, but it's of a firefighter standing on a ladder, on the ladder truck, and throwing water on the fire, which you don't see, it's just in the smoke.
Alan had to give up firefighting years ago after he injured his shoulder fighting a 9,000-acre grass fire near Burton. He now enjoys painting to relive his smoke-eating past through his artwork.
I have so many activities that it's not a problem for me to find something to do. And so that's how I spend my time.
For Positively Kansas, I'm John Wright.
You can find Alan Lister's paintings in galleries and at various art shows across the Wichita area. All across Kansas, there are some great places to enjoy the spring and summer and connect with nature. In this week's Kansas Wild Edge report, Mike Blair gives us the 411 on some of our best state parks.
Family time is at its best in Kansas state parks. You see it in the relaxed smiles of old and young, gathered around a picnic table or campfire. Routines and schedules left behind draw kids and parents back to center. Eat together, camp together, laugh together. It's all good in an outdoor setting, custom made for fun. And there's nothing like a shared day of play to put everyone back on the same page. Kansas has 26 state parks, each with unique offerings to help you enjoy the outdoors. Into water sports? Most state parks are at reservoirs where big clean waters allow power boating and jet skis and all the exciting elements that go along. On a hot summer day, water is the place to be for swimming or tubing. Wear your swimsuit all day. There's no need to change. Camp is casual and it's just around the corner. Fishing is a popular pastime, and state parks with direct access to water make great locations to catch and clean fish. Forget the long drive at day's end. Add family and friends, and no place is better for an outdoor fish fry. Maybe you like to explore the outdoors. With hundreds of miles of combined trails, some nationally recognized, hiking, biking, and horseback riding offer recreational exercise and endless discoveries in the Kansas landscape. The clean sound of birdsong and the smell of fresh air are important differences in the getaway world of a Kansas state park. For the nature enthusiast, state parks offer great viewing for wildlife, birds, and native plants. Natural habitats support a wondrous variety of life. No need for exhibits or dioramas here. Take your binoculars or cameras and quietly hike through the landscape. You'll come away with a better understanding of what Kansas really is. And then there's all the rest. Chill out and read a book. Fly a kite. Play a guitar. Tell stories around the campfire. Play cards or games. Try new recipes on the grill. And make new friends with those who came for the same reasons as you. Catch a concert, demonstration, or show. Enter a cook-off. Kansas state parks constantly add ways to enhance the visits of young and old. Check it out. Kansas public lands are waiting. And always bring the family for vacation memories that last a lifetime. I'm Mike Blair for Positively Kansas.
Next week, Mike investigates some of the most interesting creatures you'll find in the wilds of Kansas, prairie dogs. Now let's go to Macy Johnson with this week's edition of My American Dream.
Welcome back to My American Dream. I'm your host, Macy Nicole Johnson. I am joined here with my cousin, Carrie Lumpkin. So let's just kind of hop in. I just want to know about your childhood and what it was like growing up. What were some of the challenges that you faced? And
well, you know, coming up in New Orleans in that time, in the 50s and 60s, you know, life was cool. It was a family community. We were all connected. You know, all of our family, grandparents down, I have to thank them for starting this entire journey.
Right.
You know, but what they taught us was taking care of each other. There was a hierarchy that was set. You know, the older kids took care of the younger kids. And even families, mothers, cousins, all of us were there together, you know, working, cooking, cleaning.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a...
Cleaning was a thing.
Cleaning was a thing. I mean, you had to have a job.
Right.
You know.
You are a young parent, very, very young parent. And there are a lot of young parents in America.
Yes.
Talk about how that happened for you and what you had to do to make ends meet.
What I did was I signed up to go into the military. You know, as soon as I knew, you know, I signed up, went into the Air Force, and first assignment was over in Germany. You know, here's this little kid, you know, 18 years old, basically 17 years old. You know, we landed over in Germany.
Right.
You know, Bitburg Air Base, Germany. And my life, or our life, we thought was sweet. I mean, we had no money, pretty much, but we had, again, this family connection because my girlfriend, my wife at the time, she was a very strong mother also. So we worked together to make a nice home for our daughter.
So now that we've gotten to this point, we've talked about you being in the military and struggling and everything. So what would you define as your American dream?
Well, what I've learned is that you got to give back. It doesn't matter where you come from. You have to reach back and bring someone up. You know, I call it now refining your art. Everyone has a little box, you know, with something in it. You have a gift.
Right.
Whatever it is, use that gift. Find that talent and refine that talent. And that's what we're here to do now, you know, is to make everybody's dream the American dream. You know, have my kids be proud of me as I am of them. And my biggest dream is to ensure, and I think I've accomplished that, my kids have done better than I have.
Right.
You know, and that's really one part of the personal part of my dream, but in a larger scope is to bring that to everyone.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next week for another episode of My American Dream.
Thanks, Macy, and thank you for spending this time with us. If you have a story idea, please send us an email at positivelykansas@kpts.org. We love hearing from you and bringing you all these interesting stories every week. I'm Sierra Scott. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Program support provided by the F. Price Kosman Memorial Trust, Entrust Bank trustee, bringing you the Kansas Wild Edge segments on Positively Kansas.
Brought to you by Central Security Group, your experts in home automation, security, and peace of mind. View video on your smartphone and control your home's lights, locks, heating, cooling, and more. Security app compatible with Apple Watch and Amazon Echo.
The preceding program was brought to you by TZ Productions, supporting KPTS and the communities it serves in South Central Kansas. Great starts here on KPTS.
Positively Kansas is brought to you in part by the Johnson family of Uptown New Orleans, bringing you this week's edition of My American Dream.